welcome to today's video. We are going to go over what we read in the month of June, which are all right here except for our digital copies, obviously. Let's go ahead and jump into the stats. So last month I read 10 books and I DNF'd 1, which has brought our physical read number up to 55.91%, so 56% of the books that I own I've read. The average time on my TBR was 11.3 months. I don't believe I had any rereads last month. The average rating was 3.5 stars. The average page count was 352 pages for a total pages read of 3,570. Just for the ease of it, I'm going to go ahead and jump into all the digital copies that I read this month, and then we'll go into the physical books. The first physical copy is Blue Like Me by Aaron Philip Clarke. This is the second in the Trevor Finnegan series. I did enjoy the first one. I feel like the second one is a lot more character driven and a lot more character based. Then I remember the first one being that may not be the case. However, it's still a really good, solid detective series, and I think there's lots of twists and turns and good pacing and good character development. I do think reading them kind of more consecutively would definitely increase that, but definitely a good book. That was one that was part of my reading my NetGalleys. Reading the books I received through NetGalley, and I will link that, but that was a solid, good book. Dark Corners by Megan Golden. I will keep this brief. This is the second in the Rachel Crall series. Such a great detective series, but it's a detective series through a podcaster. This one, the FBI has tricked her into going down to Florida to figure out what's going on. She gets sucked up into it. I love the aspect of the podcast that they add in. I think character development is really well. I also think she does a really good job with holding that mystery. But what I think she did really well with this story was keeping who Rachel Crall was in the first one, so you do feel like you're genuinely following a character through her story, but also allowing this book to stand on its own and the character to continue to develop, and it all made sense, and I think she does a wonderful job with her stories and her plots. The last digital copy I read was Pretty Dead Queens by Alexa Dunn. This is actually a YA mystery. I think she does a fantastic job. It's a very subjective opinion, but I feel like most YA mysteries are a lot more surface level, not quite as in depth. There's not quite as many levels to the story. However, with Pretty Dead Queens, I felt like the storyline was very solid. The character development was solid. There was lots of different levels in there. It had more to the story than just a very basic story, and I thought it was wonderfully well written, and I am excited to read more of Alexa Dunn stuff, and I think that was a very good, solid start for me to start with an Alexa Dunn. So since we went through all the books we've read, I'm just going to go ahead and start with our DNF, Neal Stephenson's Termination Shock. This was in part of my blind date with the book. This was the book that I unwrapped. I'll leave the link there. Again, this is not a bad book. It's very in-depth. It's very detailed. It's got a very science fiction-y almost kind of writing in the sense of how detailed and descriptive the writing is. I started over like I think 2 or 3 times. I just couldn't connect with the book, and then looking back, I'm not really sure how I ended up with this book. I think the premise seems pretty intriguing, but after seeing like how long it is, I feel like this would have been something that fell off my TBR. But overall, it was an okay book, not one I'm interested in retrying again, and I'll probably move on from it. But overall, I would suggest it for people who like these kind of books. It just wasn't for me. The next one was The House of Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I did read a T.J. Klune last month that I thought was not bad, but pretty average. I very much enjoyed this book. This is a fantasy about the department in charge of magical youth. This man gets sent off to go make sure this house that holds the youth is safe and that the youth are okay and what needs to happen to the youth there. And this essentially an orphanage. This is a very character-heavy book. I feel like you're probably going to get the most enjoyment out of it if you connect to the characters, you're interested in the characters and their stories and their relationships and all that stuff. But I love the subtle hints of magic with this, the characters, all of it. I just think this was such a well-rounded book, and I think from this being the second book I've read, I do feel like T.J. Klune really has something with building their characters and making you invest in them that I think adds to his stories. Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the second in the Bellinger Sister series. This one's following Hannah. I enjoyed this one more than the first one. It happened one summer. I think I connected with more of who the characters were. Some of the ways they described Fox Thornton just gave me flashbacks to my husband, and for some reason made me think of him, so that might have helped with that. But I thought their chemistry was good. It was kind of fun to go back and see little snippets of Piper and Brendan, the first characters from It Happened One Summer. So the smut scenes are always really great. I think Tessa Bailey does a pretty good job. This is probably my favorite that I've read of her. I did not enjoy Window Shopping, but I did enjoy It Happened One Summer. So I think this is definitely a solid romance. Book Lovers by Emily Henry, a romance about two people in the book world who kind of have this, it's an enemies to lovers. So they're kind of enemies and they become lovers. I think what I don't mind about this enemies to lovers story is that why they're enemies and how they get over that and how they interact with each other makes sense with this scenario, so it's kind of relatable, if you will, in that sense. But I like their chemistry. I like some of their banter. It did start off in a pretty funny place, which really just hooked me in. I think it had a very good amount of humor and romance. The rom-com in that was fantastic. How to Fake It in Hollywood by Ava Wilder. A romance about a girl who's younger in her career, who's kind of at a lull, and then an older gentleman who's kind of the bad boy who needs to refresh his reputation. They do a fake dating scheme. Alas, they fall in love. I did enjoy this book. I thought it was very good, a solid book, good character development. There was nothing glaringly wrong with it, and I thought it was fun overall. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillich. This, for some reason, I have mixed feelings about this because at points in this story I was so hooked, and then at other points I just kind of dragged. And then it ends on a cliffhanger, so I feel like if I truly want to know if I'm going to enjoy this story, I have to go to the second one. So, yeah, it is a series now. I feel like it hangs on a cliffhanger. You don't know the story. You have to read the second one. So, if you're one of those people who's bad about series, either you're gonna, I feel like, need to commit to this to know what the outcome is, or you're just always going to have, like, read half a story. But this is kind of a dark fantasy. There's these prophecy cards, which I thought was really interesting. The magical system was something I hadn't seen before, but there's these prophecy cards that you use to get magic. There's this fever that you get that gives you the magic, but the more you use magic, the more it takes away from you. And they're trying to collect all these prophecy cards to end the fever and save everybody. But again, it ends on a cliffhanger. It is a series, but I did enjoy the unique magical system. The Murder Rule, very solid mystery psychological thriller. Again, I've said it many a times. I don't think anything says the description better than the synopsis. First rule, make them like you. Second rule, make them need you. Third rule, make them pay. This is definitely a revenge mystery thriller. I do think that parts of the story are pretty predictable. However, the experience of getting to that point and how you get there is still interesting. It's still intriguing. The pacing's done well, all of those things. So I still think it's a very good, solid book that many people would enjoy. She Started It. This is my book of the month unboxing and what I read for this month. Another of those mystery psychological thrillers that I think is pretty predictable, but again, it's very solid story, very solid character development, so I don't see anything wrong with it. I think the story and the experience with it is great, but there's these girls who picked on this girl named Poppy in high school. Now it's 10 years later. They're invited to her hen party on this beautiful secluded island, and things don't go right. I'm sure you can guess the outcome. I think there's definitely parts of the story that are very predictable, but that does not take away from the story and the enjoyment that you get out of it. You do go back in time and see it through diary entries, which I thought was a unique way to do it, but again, nothing just blown out the water, but definitely a very solid book too. That being said, that will wrap it up for our June reading stats, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.